Hi, everybody. This is Damien from Legion Life. As you know, we're all about sharing the inspirational stories about people who are living their best life after 40. Today, I have Julie and Marc Bennett, who are full-time RV travelers. So back in 2040, they decided to pack up and sell everything and move on the road. They've covered all 50 states and traveled something like 100,000 miles. Quite an achievement. So they also are authors of a book, a best-selling book, Living the RV Life. They are also co-creators of the RV Love blog and also creators of the RV Success Summit. So how are you guys today?
Oh, great, Damien. How are you?
No, pretty good. So, well, thank you for setting aside the time. I'm looking forward to hearing a little bit about your story. So, how about we get started, and maybe you can give us a little bit of a background about yourselves before you actually decided to do RV traveling.
Sure. Well, as you can probably tell from the accent, I'm Australian. Marc's American.
Yeah, I'm American.
Been chatting to you, New Zealander.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I moved out here from Australia solo back in 2000 and late 2008, 2009. And then we met in 2010, got married 2011. And we've been traveling by RV since 2014.
Yeah, we lived in a regular house for about 2 years together and then just said, hey, let's just take this thing on the road. I had a job that I was able to do remotely. And so we were able to just pack up and just make home wherever we chose for the next 7 years, right?
Yeah.
So
and 40 was a really pivotal age for all this because I was like 39 when I moved to the States, and I did have to ask myself, am I having a midlife crisis, like packing up with 2 suitcases moving to Boulder, Colorado? But I thought, well, maybe I am, maybe I'm not. But I was starting my life over after the economy tanked in '08, and my business imploded, and I figured, well, I have to start my life over. Am I going to do it here in Sydney, or am I going to follow my dream to go and try America on for size? And I decided to use my frequent flyer miles and moved out and on a tourist visa initially. And then I loved it. I loved Colorado, and was lucky enough to get sponsored, got a job and got an employment visa. And that's kind of how that all started. And then when we met about a year and a half after that, we were both around 40, better me 41, something like that. So really, I think our lives have definitely been better 40 onwards. I would not wind the clock back to pre-40.
I definitely wouldn't. No, our life post-40 has been way better. So.
Yeah.
No, brilliant. Well, that's what we like to hear. And being 51, I also know it's a lot better after 40 than before 40. So, but how did you guys come up with the idea to go sell up everything and then transition to, moving into an RV? Because that's kind of like quite a dramatic lifestyle change.
It is. And it's funny because I don't know if you do vision boarding or, planning for the future, but that's what we were doing. We were looking at what do we want to achieve in the 5 years to come. And we started looking at everything, and it was all like travel and experience related, not thing related and possession related. And so we started thinking, I really want to do RV travel someday, because maybe 5-10 years prior, I did quite a bit of RV travel with an old work project. And I thought, someday I'm going to do this. But then we just decided, hey, someday could be sooner than later, because they're not as expensive as we first thought.
But we didn't even know that full-time RVing existed until 2011. And it was just a few months before we got married, and we were at a pizza restaurant in Colorado Springs, and we were sitting outside on the patio, having a pizza, having a beer and just hanging out. And there was a couple next to us at the next table, and they were very clearly very fun. You could just tell when people are enjoying life and have really great energy. And we were chatting across the tables to each other, and they were full-time RVers, and we're like, what is this? And then they were telling us all about it, and we're like, that sounds so cool. And it sounded cool to be able to, and they were working. So they were working while they were traveling. And I mean, this is 10 years ago now. Yeah. But I think it was just their life force and their energy. It was so obvious that they were just having a blast. And we're like, that's pretty cool. Never thought of that. And like Mike said, it was like one day.
The initial idea came.
And then we forgot about it because it came back. Life got in the way, work, jobs, commutes, got married, and then forgot about it for a few years.
Yeah, but
until a
then
vision
once we
board
made
night.
that in that vision board night, and then yeah, thanks for winding it back a little bit further for more context. But it was, you know, when we had that realization, and then we spent probably 6 to 9 months very focused energy on making the plans and making it arrangements and getting conviction that it is truly possible. And then we just launched. We sold everything, sold, you know, didn't put stuff, just hit the road. We literally drove off into the sunset. And yeah, it was pretty awesome.
Yeah, all these years later.
And then what's funny is when we first hit the road, we just did it just a different way to have a life and make more use of the limited vacation time that we have, right? To be able to, instead of having to drive or fly to a vacation destination, we're already there. And so as soon as we finish work, we just walk out into that environment. So it's pretty great. And we first had a job, and then we later started working for ourselves.
Well, Mark had a job working for a company. He always wanted to work from home, and his employer wouldn't. It was an older, more traditional company.
Yep.
And of course, luckily for a lot of people, this has all changed now. A lot of companies that were previously opposed to working from home have had to embrace it with COVID. But Mark changed. He wanted to work from home so bad that he actually changed his job and got a job with another company, because he's like, well, I can't pursue that dream with this company. This is way before RVing was on the radar. Got the other job, and you were working from home maybe 6 months, when he's like, hang on a minute, home could be anywhere. Like, as long as I have good internet, I could be doing this anywhere. And so I think it was a lot of a perfect storm, a lot of different conversations and thoughts and ideas eventually kind of coalesced, and it just started to make sense.
So the transition, it sounds, wasn't very difficult, because you invested that initial amount of time to kind of plan it out, determine if it was viable, if you could actually make it all happen. So, and then you basically said, yes, this can happen. And then you made the jump.
Well, we did do a lot of research and planning.
Yeah. And in actually hindsight, that's what we focus on now, is trying to educate people even more to make that transition even easier for other people, because it was a lot of research we did in that period of time.
And we know ourselves really well. I think that's one of the great things about being on the other side of 40, is you just have a lot more self-awareness of what you do and don't like, what will and won't work, and what kind of things you will and you are and aren't willing to do. And so I think really we just knew ourselves well, did a lot of research, a lot of financial planning and research, because hopefully everybody listening knows RVs are typically not an investment. Anything with wheels depreciates. So it's not like having a house. Real estate generally appreciates. Of course, I'm sure a lot of people had contrary experiences to that, but RVs typically depreciate. And so, it's something you really want to think about, and think about the financial impact. And that's what we were doing. We wanted to make smart financial decisions.
And smart life decisions, but we also knew that at any moment we could just go back to a regular life. And so the idea of living this more adventurous life, if it turned out we didn't like it, we always could go back to the status quo and the normal, right? So live the adventurous and interesting life.
But once you start living differently, it's hard to go back to living quote unquote normal. It's kind of because your world opens up so much, and Mark likes to describe it as, you're living in this box, and then when you get out of that box, you all of a sudden see there are like 100 other options out there that you didn't see before. And so if you do realize that, because for most people RVing, even if you do it full time, you don't necessarily do it forever. Very small percentage of people do full-time RVing, and a much, much smaller percentage do it like indefinitely. But I think just having that adventure and having that different experiences, seeing different ways to live and different ways to RV, just made us realize that, well, we don't know when we're going to stop. We'll know when it's time, but we will just change it up and still be living differently in some way, whatever that looks like.
No, brilliant. So what other positives with the RV life? Obviously the perspective changes. You can see the world in a kind of different view. Like we're not living in the same suburb and doing the same commute every day. Now you're everywhere, meeting new people, etc. So what are some of the other benefits?
Well, to your point about, not having that same commute, that's something that's really interesting that I didn't think about before we hit the road, is that everything becomes a bit of an adventure, because you rarely even go to the same grocery store more than once or twice, right? If depending on your travel pace, but everything is new and different. And so you have to be very adaptable and used to change, because if you live in the same area, you go to that grocery store and the item you want's on aisle 5, it's shoulder height, 2/3 the way down, so, but you don't have that in this lifestyle. But I love the variety. I love that we meet such interesting people too, that you have a bit of a common bond with the people that also live this lifestyle, because they've all stepped out of the norm. And so you have that immediate common bond. And so I think there's been a lot of really interesting people we've met, which has been fun too.
And I think, just that's changing views. So, for anyone that's wondering, we are not independently wealthy and retired. We are working age. We are, striving for early retirement, but I think it makes it a little easier that a lot of people probably already think we're living a vacation. It's not quite like that, but compared to a cubicle life, it is, because we can decide, we really want to see the Grand Canyon. So we plan our out and we say, let's go spend a week in Williams, Arizona, which is an hour drive from the Grand Canyon. We can hang out for the week, we work. And then we actually arrived in a snowstorm, which we weren't expecting. But anyway, after that stopped, it was a beautiful day and we finished work and we said, let's jump in the car and we'll drive to the Grand Canyon. So on a Tuesday night, we drove an hour and we're at the Grand Canyon, and it had just been all dusted in snow. And so few people get to see it like that, because when it's happened, by the time you get there, it's melted off. But it was right there. And that's one of my most special magical moments of our travels, is things like that, and got some beautiful photos to show for it. But then we get to hang out, and we did some more work the rest of the week. And then we went and explored the Grand Canyon for the weekend, and we moved our RV to stay within the national park. And we were it was right on our doorstep. We walked out of the RV, jumped on the shuttle, went around.
Yeah, it's so close. Sites. You had to be careful sleepwalking, right? You could have.
But, you're heading in one direction, because you're not spending all that time going there and coming back. Yeah. It's like, we're going there. And now from there, we're going here. And some people travel more, I guess, by the seat of their pants, but because ours is a bigger RV. And by the way, this is not our RV. We're in a borrowed RV at the moment. We're relocating this for a friend. So we're having a nice time in this one. But
they have a huge variance in how you can live this lifestyle. This is on the higher end. This is a 45-foot long coach. I don't know if most of your markets.
It's about the size of a big bus, like those big buses. Yeah. We just tend to plan our routes more so that we know we can have somewhere to park and be there for at least a week or two, to have a stable work environment so that we can be productive, and then have cool places on our doorstep. And so you're seeing your views outside of your windows are changing all the time, changing office views.
Yep. No, very cool. Are there any negatives? Like,
oh yeah.
Well, one of the biggest negatives to me is that the maintenance of an RV. There's things do go break and need required maintenance, and especially because when you think about it, you're traveling with this RV and it's down the road, everything shakes and rattles, and so things, plumbing might come loose, or fixtures and screws and handles, and the equipment's not as robust as maybe a residential stuff, and so those things break more often. So there is more repairs and maintenance, and so you really beneficial to be handy, to be able to do things on your own, because it's not always easy to get serviced. And if you're in a motorhome, if you do need to get something serviced, you have to take your home into a shop, and then you're out of your home. You don't have a home, right? So you have to be in a hotel, so that's one of the bigger drawbacks that I can think of at first. And people who like to be really close to family, sometimes you can be far away and it might be harder to get back. But on the positive of that negative is that if you have dispersed family around the country or around your region, you can go visit them regularly. And then you don't overstay your welcome so easily, because you can have your whole home parked in their driveway instead of in their third bedroom. And so that's a pro and a con at that one. But what other negatives do you see in the lifestyle?
I think travel planning is fun, but it's also time consuming. If you're somebody who does travel plan, and the bigger your RV, the more you will probably need to travel plan. It's much easier if you're in a van or something small and nimble to just fly by the seat of your pants. But, you know, we like to be settled into a campsite by Saturday, make sure the internet's all working so we feel confident Sunday to start working on Monday. So if you're a planner and that kind of thing isn't your bag, then, you know, that might become annoying. But, you know, I didn't mind that. But it takes quite a bit of time, the travel, the packing up, the travel planning. But again, you know, when you're doing something new and it's adventure, everything in life is trade-offs, right? There's no one right way and best way, and there's no one worse way. It's just, what are you willing to trade off? Like, I think a lot of people living a regular life or a cubicle life would love the idea to do what we do and travel the country and be in cool places. But are they willing to give up the fact that you don't necessarily have a washer dryer on board and you have to go to a campground laundromat, or that you have to check into a campground and you've got changing neighbors every time you move? Some people really are very close to family in their community and their local coffee shop and being able to be a part of that. And that might be difficult for some people, but I have to say it's been surprising and inspiring, the number of amazing people that we've met on the road. And RV life, you form your own communities, and we've got tribes of friends and people that you never say goodbye so much as see you down the road, because we've got people that we've met up with, whether planned or serendipitously, in many places around the country. And I find that so cool. We're seeing some friends, actually the ones that we're relocating this RV for, we're seeing them this weekend, and we met them in Maine at a campground in 2015, and we've caught up with them in probably
4 or 5,
more like 6 or 8
yeah,
states around the country.
6 or 8 different states across the
country.
Yeah,
and that's cool. You know, I remember we were in Maine, I remember we were at the International Balloon Fiesta, or that time we were in the Florida Keys, and just all these different memories around the world together. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, the variety of people you meet as well, I guess, is like pretty cool.
Well, I think you meet such a different cross-section of people from literally all walks of life. And that's one of my favorite things about it, is it totally opens your world up to different people and scenarios and what they do for a living, or what they used to do for a living, or, you know, how they do the RV life, because nobody does it the same. Everyone's got their own way of doing it. And we've learned so much from them and been inspired by so many stories, and seeing how people make it work and how it impacts their relationship, you know, living in a small space, you know, that, and families, and how close so many families are with their bond, road school and kids. So it's been really inspiring to see how people make it work for them.
Yep.
And to your point of meeting a lot of different people, depending on the campgrounds or RV parks or out camping, boondocking, where you go can dramatically change who your neighbors are that week. Where if you live in a traditional stationary life, you're more likely to have a smaller subset of society.
Yeah, no, most definitely. So what are some of your more memorable moments? Like 2 or 3 that kind of like resonate?
Julie mentioned that Grand Canyon one, which was pretty special. And, you know, on the other side is, you know, we were in the Florida Keys, and we were at a campground where I could literally step out of my RV and walk, you know, 200 feet or less than 100 meters and actually go snorkeling in the Gulf of Mexico, you know, and just to have that accessibility. And some of the places we've parked, like in Sedona, we love Sedona, and we parked on a vista that had multi-million-dollar views. If you were to try and buy that real estate, it would cost a fortune, but we were just staying there for free, unplugged, and it was just right out our window. And
that's actually the photo on the cover of the book, which we should have brought over so we could show it.
Right.
Maybe Mark can grab it. But I mean, I think being able to have these $1 million views.
Yeah.
Like we boondock a lot in the desert, and boondocking, for people that may not familiar, is camping off the grid, you know, without utilities. We've got, you know, lithium. You don't have to have lithium batteries, but we have lithium batteries in our RV, and our friend's RV has it. We've got solar panels, we've got big water tanks, big waste tanks. And so when the pandemic broke out, actually last year, I think that was memorable too. We were actually out in the desert, and then the lockdown happened, and we're like, well, everyone has to stay in, not go out. And we're here just parked out by the cacti and looking at the mountains in the middle of the desert. And we've got water, we've got solar, we've got batteries. We're good. And really, for us, life didn't change, did it? I mean, we went to the grocery store with masks and sanitizer. That was new for everybody.
Yeah, but a couple, you know, but for the most part, we were just out there, just living our
hanging
own
out
thing. But yeah, here's that photo I was talking about. That, you know, this is a beautiful panorama photo out in Sedona.
No, amazing.
Yeah.
And that was free, totally free, just hanging out there. And the night sky gets so dark and you get to see stars that you never get to see when you live anywhere near a city.
Yeah, some of that's
It's
unexpected
amazing.
too, right? We just stayed at a rest stop one time in Kansas, right near the
Yeah.
border, and there's so little development out in there, and it turned out to be one of the dark sky nights, and it was some of the best stars we ever saw, and it was something totally serendipitous and unplanned that we chose to stop there that night. So it's you got to leave a little bit of room for the serendipity to arrive, you know, in that lifestyle, because if you get too rigid, I think you miss some of the really cool experiences.
Yeah, don't ever, you know, some friends of ours actually told us years ago, they said the most dangerous thing you can pack is a schedule.
Yeah.
That's a shout out to Chris and Cherie from Technomadia who shared that with us. And they were people that we followed before we hit the road. And we learned a lot from them. They teach people how to get online. Actually, we bought their ebook on how to get mobile internet from the road back in 2014. And once we realized we could get internet and work from the road, that's when we're like, okay, we're doing this. That was the thing. And so to be able to get internet in some of these remote places that you wouldn't even imagine, we had internet in that place out in the middle of Sedona, able to work. It's pretty cool.
But I guess that's how everyone travels as well. Like nowadays, if you use a schedule and you've got a short window of time, so you try to kind of like tick all the boxes, you don't really experience the place, do you? And you don't leave yourself open to, you know, new opportunities. You know, someone will go, oh, go check out this place. You just got a fixed mindset on where you want to go. You got the blinders on anything else. You got to be open to opportunities.
Yeah, and that is a big difference, what you're saying there with RV travel instead of traditional airplane and hotel travel. Airplane, hotel travel, you're even more isolated. You're in your hotel room or you've done your exact itinerary, but when you're in an RV lifestyle, you're in a campground, you have much more interaction with other people if you choose to.
Yep.
Which then also opens up a lot more opportunity to see other things. And since you have your own ability to cook all of your meals in your RV, you're going to the local grocery store, you're going to the farmer's market, you're going to a much more immersive experience in that area than you do in traditional travel, which then lends itself to those hidden gems and exploring things you wouldn't have known about.
The last year with the pandemic, it's been so, excuse me, such a big change for everyone to adjust for that. Honestly, for us, it's been pretty minimal, the impact, because we can still be outside walking around a campground and be socially distanced. And, you know, obviously we put on masks and things to go to the store if we don't get things delivered. But really for us, life has just continued almost as normal, really. It's been very, very minimal adjustment.
In that you have full capability to control your environment, no matter what part of the country you're in. In fact, you can choose to go to areas that you feel are safer or lower risk. And then just instead of being in large urban areas, like some folks, that's an issue. You can just choose to go more rural, more out by yourself. But it's great for that.
No, brilliant. So, well, you guys have covered 50 states. So what are some of your top destinations for people looking to travel by RV?
Like we mentioned, Arizona, Sedona, Arizona is one of our favorite places.
Yeah. And, you know, with RV travel, you tend to follow the weather. So in the winter, you go to the southern part of the states, and in the summer, you go to the northern. You can travel widely and are less likely to be in the extreme southern states. But
Florida Keys definitely is a place I think that if you haven't been to, everyone should visit at least once. But I'm going to tell you, everyone raves all about the Keys, and it is beautiful, and we love the Keys. But those little no-see-ums, do you know what no-see-ums are? Those little invisible, tiny bugs. They're these tiny little insects that are so small they can come in through the mesh of your screen door. And for some reason, they love me, and they love to munch on my ankles. So Florida's all these beautiful. I want to do a blog post about it. You see all these beautiful scenic shots and sunsets. But does anyone show you photos of their little bites on their legs?
Well, what's really funny about that to me is that, you know, we took this amazing photo when the water along the beach went totally still, and it was amazing reflection. But the whole key to not having those no-see-ums bite you is you need a constant breeze.
Yeah.
So if the breeze stops enough to have still water, you know people are getting chewed alive.
Yeah.
But
back to Damien's question, the top places. I think Maine Maine is beautiful
in the summer.
In the summertime. Maine is gorgeous, and so much to see and do there. And get up to Bar Harbor around Acadia National Park is beautiful. What are some other favorites? The Pacific Northwest and the Oregon coast. Oregon coast is
the
gorgeous.
West Coast is beautiful.
And I'm trying to think of places that are a little bit, you know, you get your standard, of course, Highway 1, Big Sur, California. I mean, everyone says those places, but I'm trying to think of some things that are a little bit unique as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I love the Colorado. It's got so much diversity and so much beauty to see. And
the western side of Colorado is particularly beautiful.
It is, because it's less populous and more nature. But also, you know, to the fact with the RV travel is that when people, if you time it all right, people love to see the fall colors. But if you time it all right, you can have an extended fall color season, because you can start really north when it starts and then just work your way south as the temperatures change. And that's pretty special.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's something
Alaska.
special.
Alaska was amazing.
Alaska is amazing.
But I will tell you, we didn't take our RV to Alaska. But the good thing is we were in our RV in Vancouver, about an hour drive from Vancouver, Canada. This is back in 2017. We'd been to 49 states. We flew to Hawaii, and excuse me.
Yeah, the bridge isn't finished yet.
And we were there, and I woke up one morning, and because we had our 50th state to visit, which is actually the 49th state of the US, is Alaska. And I woke up one morning, I had this really strong intuitive message that said, I wonder if there are any last minute cruises to Alaska. So I jumped onto the internet and I found a $399 7-day cruise from Vancouver to Alaska, leaving in 3 days.
Awesome.
And I said, Mark, we're doing this. He's like, okay. So, you know, that's that serendipity. We hadn't planned for that. You could plan an Alaska cruise. People aren't doing cruises right now, of course, but, you know, hopefully one day things will settle down and people will feel more comfortable doing that. But for us, that was a wonderful way to, you know, celebrate our 50th state visited and just see a beautiful part of the country. It's really spectacular if you love nature.
You know, but most every state has something really special when you look for it. And someone, like, to Julie's point, I think she made a little bit earlier, is some of the really neat things that we like are not necessarily the top destinations. You know, someone says, oh, you got to see Grand Canyon. Yes, everyone, it is truly magical, and I would recommend it. But there's a lot of other national parks, state parks, and that are not talked about very often that really are stunning. And because they're not talked about as much, the crowds aren't as big. And so it's a deeper experience you can have. Yeah.
Capitol Reef National Park is one example in Utah. We'd been to Zion, we'd been to Bryce, and we took Scenic Byway 12, which is a beautiful road trip, you know, just even in a vehicle. And we got to the end and we'd been driving all day and we'd seen so much beauty. And I was kind of tired, actually. Yeah. And then we got there and then the national park was right there. And I'm like, oh, do we? And I'm so embarrassed to admit this, but I actually asked the ranger, is it worth going in? I asked the ranger of a national park, is it really worth going in? He's like, well, I think so. I'm like, okay, well, we're here now. Let's go. It was 5 o'clock, you know, and we'd been driving all day. I just wanted to get to a restaurant and have myself a glass of wine and some dinner. So we drove into this national park. We had a Mini Cooper convertible at the time. The top was down. We drove through all these red rocks above us. So we were actually driving down a riverbed with the cliffs beside us, and I'm just like, wow, it just completely blew my mind. And it's now one of my favorite experiences. And I'm still embarrassed that I asked the national park ranger. So we're really never asked that of any national park ranger because they're all amazing.
Yeah, 1,000-foot sheer cliffs, and you're driving down the dried creek bed of it. It's just amazing. Cool.
And not crowded.
Yeah.
Cool. So how do you guys go about determining what destinations you go to and what's kind of planning you go through?
Definitely weather is the first consideration. We don't like going to Tornado Alley during tornado season. Yeah. Even though once we were in Texas and there was a tornado that touched down 5 miles away. We've had that experience. You know, try to avoid the rainy season.
Yeah, so weather's definitely a factor. You know, lower elevation in southern in the winter and higher elevation in further north in summer. But that's definitely a factor. And then one of the things with full-time travel about destinations that I think is important to talk about is that we don't put as many miles on our vehicles as most people think, because a regular RVer goes somewhere and comes back, goes there, comes back. With a full-time RVer, you just go there and there and there, so that you don't have the back.
Yeah.
which saves you tons of miles. And so you can just move at a slower pace. And I think, you know, a lot of people, when they first get out there, go just gangbusters, try and get a new location every day or two. And if you slow it down, you'll get a lot more fun out of it.
Mm-hmm. But the other things that would determine our travels are things like particular events happening in an area. So a really fantastic one, whether you're an RV or not, that I think everyone, again, should attend at least once in their life is the Albuquerque International Balloon Fiesta. And you've probably seen photos of it with all these colorful balloons in the air. And it's magical. I know they have balloon fiestas in many locations around the world, but that's really easy to get to in Albuquerque, and that's in early October. And so we'll sometimes look at a year, and, you know, obviously pandemic year aside, that's an anomaly, but we'll look at what's cool events are coming up that we want to be a part of, that we can, like the total solar eclipse in 2017. So we planned to go to Oregon, but inland, because, you know, once you're on the coast, it's too foggy. You don't get the good visibility. So we planned that trip, and we ended up being in a field with 5,000 people watching the total solar eclipse. And for many people, that's a once in a lifetime experience, but we're all lucky in that 2024 it's coming again. And I think they'll be reaching more places on the land in the US. So if anyone's thinking about something, 2024, look for the total solar eclipse and go to a place where they have 100% totality, because very different to 99% totality. You have to be in the 100% to get the full experience of it. And that is one of my favorite memories.
Absolutely.
Since we've been on the road.
Absolutely a top memory.
It's wild and very cool. So that kind of an event will help determine our travel route. And then, you know, what's on the way, and, you know, is there a family thing we're trying to get to? And so trying to just plan in family events, any particular festivals or events we want to be a part of, or occasions like that's a big determinant as well.
Okay, cool. So 50 states crossed off the list. So what's next? So you're going to go more in depth around the US, or planning to go further afield?
Well, a bit of both. I mean, there's still so much that we haven't seen in the United States. We could still definitely do more of that. But I think Julie and I both have visions of doing some RV travel overseas, whether it be in Australia or in Europe or
New
anywhere.
Zealand.
Yeah, New Zealand would be amazing. We've had a number of people rave about their trips to New Zealand. So,
and we were planning actually on going to Europe last summer, but we had to cancel that. And then we're going to go to Australia in the fall, and we canceled that. So, you know, we're just going to give things time to settle down a bit. And we would love to get over there and rent an RV and just travel around and do a different style of travel. We've been learning from, if you haven't interviewed Mike and Anne from Honey Trek, are a fantastic couple, and they're very inspiring how much travel they've done in multiple countries in an RV. They've done 83,000 miles from Arctic Circle down to Baja, Mexico, in America over the last 4 years. So we've been learning a lot from them too, about, you know, having that comfort and confidence to go to overseas travel, because, you know, whatever is known and familiar just seems more comfortable. But I think that's part of the fun of travel sometimes, is putting yourself in a situation that is a bit out of the unknown, but not so unknown that you never have the courage to get up and go, but enough to know that once you get there, you'll be fine. So definitely love the idea of exploring Europe.
Yeah,
that's probably top of my list.
Yeah, no, cool. Well, you guys definitely seem to be the kind of people who like to get a little bit out of your comfort zone. So I think Europe will be a good experience.
Have you been?
I lived in the UK, and then I traveled a little bit, but not that much. So
yeah,
but that's also on my list. I'm thinking of more of a moving there, living there kind of experience, because I have a Dutch passport. So so I think it'll be...
My mother's Dutch. My dad's
Okay.
I've got a British passport.
Cool. So now, you guys mentioned before about how travel kind of brings couples together, or changes their kind of like perspective. So I think it's quite a good opportunity now to kind of like ask, you know, what would you say to other couples about, they don't have to do RV travel, but just travel and having adventures together, the benefits?
Well, I think there's pros and cons to it. I think it's mostly a pro, because it can really give you some quality time together and create memories together, which can deepen your bond together. which is really wonderful. But I like to caution people, just because living in a small space, whether it be in an RV or an extended travel of any type, is a bit of an accelerator or an amplifier. So if you have challenges in your relationship, it will bring them to the forefront. But if you're in a position where you can deepen it, it will definitely deepen it quite a bit. And I think for us, it's of course been the deepening, and it's been wonderful to have all those wonderful new shared experiences. And it's priceless to be able to have that. But what do you think?
Yeah, I've got something to add to that. Is I think, for us, as Mike said, those shared memories and experiences that you have together are really, really amazing and really special. And you learn a lot about yourself when you travel together, whether it's an RV or any kind of travel. And because you do get faced with unexpected and stressful situations.
Yep.
And you do get to learn how to navigate those. And I think it's really good for building your confidence to know that whatever you're served up, you can handle it and you'll find a way to deal with it. So I think that's really good. And I think you just learn to become a team. We're in this together. And so it's really good for teamwork and doing things together. And, I take care of the travel planning and route planning and where we're going to go. And so Mike never has to worry about that. While he takes care of the driving and repairs and maintenance. And, some couples that will be in reverse, but that's how it works for us. So I think learning to be a team, and what do you enjoy doing and what are you good at doing and what do you enjoy doing and what are you are good at doing, and just dividing those tasks. And I think it's really important you do share those, because if one person is taking the responsibility and the lead on almost all of that, it creates an imbalance and can create resentment. But if you're both on that page, and then I think just agreeing that, we're going to communicate about any challenges or issues, because when you're in a small space, as Mark said, there isn't room for problems to grow. And so you have to nip them in the bud. And so when you are traveling together, compared to when you're living a regular life, and again, this is all pre-pandemic, people would get in their cars and do their commutes and go to their jobs and be away from each other 8-10 hours a day or longer, come back home, and you've just got limited periods of time together. So I think 2 points I want to make to that is, one is you get a lot more quality time together, which is a great advantage if you enjoy spending time together. But also because you know each other so well, and that you become more attuned to one another. You can pick up if something's off with someone sooner. Yep. You know what I mean? Instead of it like building up and then becoming an explosion. But I think really being able to create those division or separation or allocation of things that, we each are doing things and we're in this together. And I think that's important.
Yep. No, very cool. This is a kind of lead in, I guess, into, well, how now do you manage this lifestyle where you're working and everything's kind of like on top of each other? Like you're working from home. Like I work from home. For me, it's not much of an issue, but a lot of people go, well, how can you work from home? Don't you have any separation from your life and all of this kind of stuff? And, now you guys, I think it's like nearly 7 years, everything's kind of like together. So do you find it challenging, or for you guys, it's kind of easy?
Challenging.
Definitely challenging. I definitely, I think I mentioned earlier in the call is that when we first hit the road, I had a work separate from our lifestyle. And Julie had some other things that she would do in the day.
I was creating the blog and the YouTube channel. Yeah.
And so we'd work on those. And then at the end of the day, we would separate and we'd have that time together, more like a traditional family, even though we were still in that same space. But then when we started our own business that circled around our lifestyle, what she did with the blog and YouTube, and it built up to a level that it became what we do. That's when the work-life balance became a real challenge, is because it was our entire life, So you're in the coach, and when you're out walking around a campground, you're surrounded, but you are always in quote unquote work environment. So it was very hard to separate him at that point, but
it's a
you
constant,
just have to have some discipline and try and,
which is easier said than done, but I think it's always top of mind. And I think any couple that works together, knows that there's always, it's never just smooth sailing, because usually opposites attract. And that's the case with us, as Marc has strengths and talents in areas that I do not, and vice versa. So in that sense, we're a really good team. But then that's also when we have different viewpoints on things and communication challenges. But we just learn to just, I think each time we learn more, don't we, about how to deal with that, or, and some things, if you're just not both, if neither of you enjoy doing it, find someone to outsource it to. Life's too short to keep doing the stuff you don't like doing, or you're not as good at doing. And I know that can be hard when you're starting a small business, doing that. It was hard for us taking that step and that leap of faith. But I think having the flexibility over our schedule in our life is one of the biggest benefits, really. And that's another reason why we like RVs, or like creating space in RVs when you in your home as well. That's a dedicated workspace, because if you have your computer set up, in your bedroom or in a corner of the living room that you can't really hide it away, it is really hard to switch off. And that's what we found. Our first RV, we had a dedicated office. It was like bunkhouse for kids. We don't have kids, so we took that out and modified it so it became a dedicated office with a curtain. He could close it off at the end of the day. And that was, it seems like not such a big thing, but it was huge, because then it worked fantastically. But then in our second RV, the workspace was in the living area. And so it was always there. You'd always see it. You'd always be thinking, oh, I could be doing that. I should be doing that. And that was definitely harder to switch off, for sure. So, I think everyone's different. Some people are really good and really disciplined with that. But, for us, it definitely became harder to switch off, because our business is our life and our work. And so that becomes tricky. But, if anyone's worked out the secrets to that, please let us know if you've got tips, because we are constantly trying to refine and do better with that.
Very good. So what's, I guess, the tips or advice you'd give to someone who's considering moving into the RV kind of like lifestyle, doesn't know if it's something they want to do, they kind of think in the back of the head, it's kind of interesting. What would you say? These are the things to consider, before you actually get started.
Well, definitely do your research. The more you plan, the more success you'll have. But I think one step that's a big one in that direction would be to rent an RV. Yeah. Because if you rent an RV and for maybe a week or something, that could give you a good taste of what it's like to have that. And also what kind of a size and floor plan works for you, what you're comfortable driving. I think that's the first thing I would recommend. We didn't do that, by the way, but we highly recommend it. Yeah, I think that's we have rented, huge but not step, before we started. And tip towards having the success on clarity on whether it'd be a good fit for you, for sure.
And buy used. I think it's very common for people to just want to go out and find the RV that they love and is new. It's going to cost you a lot more money. And really, most people find that their first RV, once they actually get in it and start living in it and spending time in it, will find where it isn't working for them. And it's very common for people to change RVs in the first year of ownership. Very, very, sometimes much less. We've actually met one fellow who didn't change RVs 3 times in 4 months or something.
Less than 6 months.
It was really a lot. And he started off with a little Class C, which is like those rentals that you see at the rental companies. And did he end up with the big fancy bus like the rock stars drive? And we're like, well, that was a big step. But he had to go through 4 RVs, and I can only imagine what an expensive exercise that was. I'm talking
trading them. But if you had done the research, it was penny wise, or no, what is it?
When you think about it, penny wise, pound poor, I don't know, whatever it is. I don't remember. But so rent an RV first, because you may not even like it. And then it'll just give you a feel of what kind you like. There are so many kinds. 2, buy used if you buy one.
But I think one important point on the buy used that Julie didn't mention is that these are unlike cars. People think of new cars as just being totally problem-free, bulletproof for many, many years. RVs are almost the opposite. If you find a well-cared for, well-maintained, pre-owned RV, it will be in better condition and less trouble for you than a brand new one. Because they
counterintuitive, right?
New ones always have things to work out, always have bugs to work out, no matter the price point. So That's one important side.
It's like when you build a new house, right? It's got a punch list and all these things have to be fixed. You never just, here's your new house and everything's perfect. It's never like that. And that's like that with RVs, but they're on wheels going down the road like an earthquake all the time. So I think managing those expectations is really important, because, you know, it's heartbreaking to see people that, oh, we're excited, we want to buy an RV. They go to a dealer on the weekend and next thing they're walking, you know, after 5 minutes of their research usually consists walking around a lot with a salesman, and then they drive out with a brand new RV and then start having issues and wonder why. And I think that can be a very discouraging experience. And we like to help manage people's expectations and educate them to a level, you know, through our book, through our online courses, through our blog, our YouTube videos, to help them manage those expectations and learn what's important for them, because there's no one right way to RV. And just to get out there. And I think when you have a bit more of an understanding of what to expect, knowing that you'll never be able to know everything in advance, it's like any travels, right? You'll always still learn as you go. But if you have the basic fundamentals around safety and, you know, the affordability and it's very easy to get tempting into those new things with the bells and whistles, but, you know, you end up paying for it. And you don't want that to also impact your experience by, you know, being financially stressed by that decision. And buying used can really help reduce the issues, but also reduce the financial loss if you go to sell it.
Yeah, no, definitely. So what would your advice be to a couple who is not that happy with their kind of life and, you know, they want to make a change, but they're kind of a little bit scared about making a change? So you guys made quite a dramatic change. So what advice would you give to a couple in that kind of situation?
Well, I think for me, similar to what I mentioned at the beginning, is that what do you really have to lose from trying this different lifestyle? And because at worst case, if you can just go back to the life you chose. But, you know, like Julie had the box analogy, is at least when you step out of the box, if you're uncomfortable and you know you want change and you're in that box, at least stepping out of that box, whether it's into RV travel or into some other type of lifestyle, at least by stepping out of that box, you realize there's 1,000 other boxes out there to try. And that can, whether it's the RV one that fits or something else.
I would say ask yourself, what is your why? Like, why are you doing this? Why are you unhappy? What kind of things do you think might make you happy? Because you may not know until you try them. But I think, you know, when we cover this in chapter 2 of our book, Living the RV Life, is like, what is your why for doing this? Because some people's why for making any change, doesn't have to be an RV, is like, I want to spend more time with my family. I want to spend more time with my partner. And that was one of our big whys. We wanted to spend more time together and with our dog and travel together, which is difficult with traditional travel to take your pets with you. Is your why to, you know, just really make the most of your life and health and time while you still have it, because tomorrow's promised to no one. And what have you got to lose? As Mark said, what if you got to lose? So
is your why to save money or to have a big time or to have experiences that you didn't get to see? But I agree totally. That's a primary question, is to ask yourself why they need the change. What is it in their current life that they want to change?
And remember, you know, if you look at, many of you may have seen this analogy before, you look at a rule, you know, when you're seeing the years in your life and you look at how many years you've already lived and how many years are remaining and how short that is to compare to, you know, here people on your podcast here probably in their 40s, 50s. I mean, we would like to think we're only halfway through our life, but we don't know. We just don't know. And, you know, I always just think, you know, I don't want to live a life of regret. So when I moved to the States by myself just before I was 40, and my mom was so worried, and I'm like, Mom, I said, if anything happens to me, I said, know this. I said, I never had any regrets. I said, I always went after what I was really wanted to do in my life. And I said, and even though it may not look like many other people's normal lives, I said, if something unfortunate was to happen, I was to die young, just know that at least I didn't die. What's the saying? Don't die with the music still left in you. You know, go out there and just do the things that you always wanted to do, because, you know, I think we've seen this last year that, you know, that there are no guarantees. So just do it. Just go for it.
So that carries on for all over 40s, isn't it? Just do it. Don't worry about it.
It's a lifelong philosophy. You know, I think we're not people to just go and jump in and take big risks and throw caution to the wind. I know plenty of people who do that. As you get older, that gets harder to do because you've got more to lose. When you're 20s and 30s, whatever, right? You think you've got the whole life, but I think life ahead of you, you get to your 40s and your 50s, and, you know, we start seeing friends have health issues, or, you know, relationship challenges, or, you know, financial health that can cut things short, and things don't always work out the way that we thought. And so, you know, it's almost like you get a second chance to relook at life and say, that's the great thing about 40. This is how I lived the first half of my life. And then how do I want to live the second half of my life? That's what it was for me. I did a complete reset. It's what it was for you when we met and got married and started doing this. And, you know, if you don't start now, when?
Yep,
so
definitely. So what's your guys' definition of living your best life, or what I call a legendary life?
Ooh. I think that's a daily thing. I think it doesn't need to be the big grandiose action that people might think, so much as the everyday. You know, I think so often we're striving toward, when I get to this, when I make this much money, when I achieve that, as opposed to, what does your life look like now that brings you joy? You know, how do you live the schedule? Get up at the time you want to get up. You know,
it's
do the things you want to
definitions
do
of
on a daily
success,
basis.
right? It's placing a value, like, on what's most important to you. If it's not, as Julie often says, there's many forms of currency, right? It's not just financial wealth. It's time is worth a lot too. So we have total freedom of our time and our schedule. I rarely know what day it is. I'm glad we showed up for your meeting today, because, you know, but just joking, of course, but the truth is, we don't necessarily have a schedule, and having that freedom and flexibility of our time and our location and how we want to live our life. If I want to go on a bike ride in the middle of the day, I can do that. And so, whereas other jobs might have been restrictive. And so many different forms of currency, many different definitions of success, and living a life that provides you the maximum amount of your own defined success is the win. And that's the way to live the legendary life.
Yep. No, very good answer. So if there were 3 life lessons you could pass on to other people, what would they be?
Ooh, 3 life lessons passed on to other people.
Boy, it's hitting us hard here.
I know. I, for me, one thing, as somebody who was single and a workaholic for most of the first 40 years of my life, thinking, you know, didn't realize at the time until hindsight, it was just like having that, you know, a person, or, you know, whether it's other people, whether it's family, friends, or a significant other, then spending time with that person or those people, for me, has actually become much more important. You know, you never see someone or hear of anyone on their deathbed wishing they spent more time at work.
Yeah.
And so being present and available with the people that you love, for me, is a big one. You?
Oh, it's very difficult for me to come up with life lessons.
I'm kind of more of the think on my feet kind of gal, and Mark's but the introvert who likes to process and have time to think about that. But you've got so many gems, honey. You could just
Well, you know, another life lesson to your work one, you know, work is just, it needs to be some secondary, but one that I think a lot of people resonate with, that I've shared before, is that so many people get so caught up in climbing the corporate ladder or their career ladder in general, that they climb right past the rung that they would have been happiest at. And so if you just focus, you stay present with yourself and know what you desire, I think that's a big lesson, is to not stay laser focused on this career path when you just could go right past something that you would have enjoyed more. And I was almost always working for others. And when we took on this to work on it by ourselves, I've had a lot of appreciation for those different flexibilities and freedoms. They have their own set of challenges, but the freedoms outweigh them.
Yeah, Mark's turned down many promotions and even ones that he was offered while we were on the road, even though his mom thought that was going to be career suicide. He actually has been offered multiple promotions that he turned down because they didn't bring him joy.
And I knew it'd destroy the remaining work-life balance that I had. And if I place a higher value on being able to get on the bike or get out for a walk or have my evenings to myself than having the title of a high-ranking officer.
And I think the third and last thing I would say is just, and again, we touched on this before, is like really define your own measures of success. And it's so easy in life, especially with social media, to be comparing ourselves to others. And nothing is ever what it seems. You know, don't ever look at just how many followers somebody has or how many subscribers they have, and make up a picture in your head about how successful or happy they are, because that really, I have learned, is an illusion. So if you just get very clear on what is important to you, what matters to you, and define what is your successful life look like, you know, literally write it down. What time do you get up in the day? What do you do in the day? You know, how do you spend your day? And then just keep working on that on a daily basis, and then you will achieve success, I think, in your way for you,
yes, no,
which
definitely.
is worth more than anything. Yeah.
Sure.
Well, to your point of that illusion of the social media, is that so many people, I do think, get caught up in what they see in other people's feeds on their social medias and thinking that that's their everyday moment of their life. But you got to remember, these people are putting up the photos of their high points. They're not putting their average or their low points in general. And so you're comparing your average with their high point. And I think that's an important time to reset.
No, definitely. And then also sometimes people forget to live their own life, too busy looking and comparing themselves to someone else's life, forgetting that there's a lot of things that are going well in their life. And if they focus a little bit more, it'd probably be quite an extraordinary life if they weren't so worried about someone else's life.
That is absolute 100%. Truth. Absolute. Yes.
Yeah. No, well said.
So guys, well, it's been brilliant speaking to you. I'm sure a lot of people will be inspired and also find a lot of valuable information. So maybe before we head off, you can give us a little bit of a rundown on RV Love, what you guys are up to, because you're doing some pretty interesting stuff. And then also let people know where they can find you online.
Yeah, well, we have been sharing as RV Love. That's exactly how it's spelled, RVLOVE.com, on our blog and YouTube since we hit the road back in 2014. So coming up 7 years now. And, you know, we love to share, you know, experiences, what we've learned, things about our RVs and the gear that we use over at the blog and YouTube. We also have our book, Living the RV Life, Your Ultimate Guide to Life on the Road, will be a fantastic help if that's something you're considering doing. We've got our second book coming out this summer. We can't reveal the name of it yet because it's still top secret, but that's going to be coming out this summer. And we have our online RV Success School. I don't want this to sound like a promotion, but what we would love to do is invite your listeners to a free event that we're hosting. It's called the Hit the Road RV Summit and RV Show. It's totally virtual, so people can join from anywhere around the world. We've met a lot of expats online, actually, that are wanting to come back to the US and are exploring what it's like to live the RV life. We've got one person from the UAE, and they're like, well, I can't get to RV shows, so I'm learning online and doing all these virtual RV tours. And so online, we're able to reach a lot more people, and that's a free event on the 24th and 25th of April that we'd love your people to know about and come and join us and hear from some other great RVers and just have some fun and maybe win some prizes. But we're in Florida right now, and we're going to hang out here for probably a few more weeks, maybe till the end of the month. Then we're going to head up the East Coast to New England area and return this coach to its rightful owner. But it sure has been fun borrowing this RV for a while, and then we're going to head back to Colorado. But yeah. That's what we're up to, and we're so happy to have been able to spend time with you today. And hopefully, some of what we've shared has inspired some of your listeners to get out and live their legend life too.
Brilliant. Well, thank you again. It's been a pleasure.